In the future, huge job losses, homelessness, and crazy riots turn Los Angeles into a giant crime zone. The prisons are completely packed, so the government sets up red zones just to lock up the worst violent criminals. But even with that, hundreds of brave cops are losing their lives on the job every single day. To fix this massive crisis, the government rolls out something called the Mercy Court. It is a super smart AI system that acts as the judge, the jury, and the executioner all at once. Suspects get their final sentence in just a few hours. The crazy part? The AI automatically assumes you are guilty unless you can actually prove you are innocent. Over 2 years, this AI executes 18 people, drops crime by a massive 68%, saves billions in tax money, and makes the public feel safe again. We cut to a courtroom where Detective Chris wakes up tied to a chair. Suddenly, the AI judge named Maddox pops up on the screen and says the trial can finally start because Chris's alcohol levels are low enough. She tells him he was knocked out cold for 6 hours and asks him to swear to tell the truth, which he does. Maddox drops a bomb on him. He is charged with killing his own wife. Body camera footage plays, showing cops breaking into his house. They find his wife Nicole bleeding on the floor from stab wounds while their daughter Britt cries right next to her. When the cops ask who did this, Nicole uses her dying breath to say Chris did it. Chris watches this in total shock and starts panicking when he hears his name. Maddox points out that Chris was the only one in the house with Nicole when she got stabbed. Chris fights back, saying she's lying. He quickly searches the web and sees his face all over the news. The articles talk about his arrest and how he used to be a huge public supporter of the Mercy program. In fact, he and his cop partner Jack were the ones who arrested David, the very first criminal executed by the Mercy Court. Maddox asks for his official plea, and Chris yells that he is not guilty. Maddox coldly states that the evidence shows a 97.5% chance that Chris is guilty. To avoid getting executed, he has to drop that number down to 92% in just 90 minutes. To do this, he gets full access to the Los Angeles Municipal Cloud, a giant network where every citizen and business is forced by law to connect their devices. If he fails to lower his guilt score, the chair he is tied to will fry him with a deadly sonic pulse. A giant timer pops up on the screen and Maddox starts reviewing the clues. First, Chris got to work at 8:51 a.m., but never actually went inside the building. Instead, he drove straight back home. Nicole refused to unlock the door and told him to talk to her through a lawyer. An angry Chris punched the security camera and used his keys to get in. Nicole tried to physically push him out before the door closed. Maddox skips the video forward, showing that Chris stayed inside the house for 26 minutes. Right after he left, his daughter Britt came home from a sleepover and screamed. The police report shows Nicole was stabbed by someone right-handed. One really deep cut ruined her spine and went right through her liver. To make things worse, fresh drops of Nicole's blood were found on Chris's clothes. After leaving his house, Chris hit up a bar to drink, even though he swears he didn't. But security cameras show him super drunk and throwing punches at cops when they try to arrest him. He runs outside and tries to hijack a random person's car, but the cops tackle him hard and knock him out. Chris says he has zero memory of any of this happening. Maddox points out that the heavy drinking is exactly why he can't remember. Chris begs to talk to his daughter Britt, but the trial rules only allow official witnesses and minors are strictly banned. She is currently staying safely with her grandparents. However, the rules do say if the suspect actually knew the victim, they can send a message asking for a phone call to share their grief. Chris is at a loss for words, so he just lets Maddox send an auto-generated text to Britt. The rules also let him call his addiction sponsor. A video message pops up from Rob, his sponsor from Alcoholics Anonymous. Rob yells at Chris for not calling him when he felt the urge to drink again. It turns out Rob also worked at the same company as Nicole, and he was the guy who called the cops when she missed her work shift. After the video finishes, Maddox digs into their relationship history. Chris and Nicole started dating 20 years ago and tied the knot 3 years later. Exactly 1 year after that, they had Britt. Their family life was totally fine until Chris's police partner, Ray, died on the job. The awful trauma pushed Chris right back into drinking alcohol. His drinking sparked massive fights at home, and Nicole started planning a divorce. Text messages she sent to her family and friends reveal Chris lost his temper a crazy 57 times in just the last 6 months. Maddox pulls up another video showing Britt talking to a random guy Chris doesn't even know. Maddox exposes that Britt has hidden social media pages where she posts pictures of herself partying. In one video clip, Britt tells her friend that her mom won't stop crying and that her dad keeps getting super aggressive. Right in the middle of the trial, Britt actually manages to call Chris. She is completely breaking down in tears. Chris promises her he didn't kill Nicole and says this is all a huge setup. But before she can say anything else, her grandpa snatches the phone and hangs up. Maddox chimes in to remind Chris he only has 1 hour and 8 minutes left. Chris quickly calls his partner, Jack, who is still hanging around the crime scene. Chris pulls up the police files and asks Jack to walk through the house for him. A cool 3D hologram pops up to show Jack's live camera view. In the living room, they spot a smashed vase on the floor, which looks like it got knocked over during a fight. In the kitchen, Britt's bloody footprints are everywhere, and there is blood smeared on the wall, proving there was a struggle. A broken plate shows Nicole tried to fight back. They also notice one single knife is missing from the kitchen block, and it perfectly matches the murder weapon. Chris's fingerprints are all over that knife, but he claims he just used it to cook food. Crime scene cleaners also found fibers, hair, skin cells, and DNA that all perfectly match Chris. Chris decides to snoop through Nicole's phone records. He remembers she was texting someone right after their morning fight, but her phone shows absolutely zero calls or texts from that time. He asks if she had a work phone. Maddox didn't know about a second phone, so she grabs a mystery number from Chris's old call logs and dials it. Back at the house, Jack hears a phone buzzing outside. She follows the ringing to a car, smashes the window, and pulls out Nicole's second phone. It is a shady black market phone that isn't connected to the city's cloud system. The only calls and texts on it went to another completely unregistered number. Maddox calls that mystery number. The person on the other end hangs up the second they hear Maddox's robot voice, but the quick signal gives them enough data to track the location. Jack hops on her flying police bike and speeds over there. While they wait, Maddox points out that since Chris already knew Nicole was hiding secrets, his guilt probability finally drops to 0.8%. The tracking signal leads to a hotel, and the target is moving toward the back door. Jack and two other cops rush in to block the exit just as a guy named Patrick tries to run away. When Patrick sees the cops, he sprints back into the hotel, kicking off a wild chase. Maddox pulls up Patrick's files. He is a local chef, he is late on his rent, and he has been investigated twice for stealing Social Security money. Patrick dodges into a blind spot with no cameras and gets away for a second, but Jack sends up a police drone which catches him hiding on the roof. The cops rush up and tackle him, and everyone falls down a level before they finally slap the cuffs on him. Patrick swears he didn't do anything wrong. He says he only ran because he was terrified the cops would frame him. Chris aggressively asks why Nicole was hanging out with him. Patrick claps back, saying he gave Nicole the attention that Chris never did. He admits they flirted and went on a few secret dates, but it never turned into a real relationship. Nicole just wanted a safe way to talk, so Patrick bought her the burner phone. Maddox checks the cloud and finds old security footage proving they really did meet up. However, the cameras also show Patrick was busy cooking at work all day, giving him a rock-solid alibi. He is definitely not the killer. Even so, Jack arrests him for running from the cops. With just 53 minutes left on the clock, Chris's guilt score skyrockets back to 98% because his wife's secret dates give him a perfect motive for murder. Feeling cornered, Chris finally confesses that earlier that morning, Nicole found the secret stash of booze he keeps hidden in his car. He admits he has been secretly drinking again for almost a year. Maddox digs into the archives and finds an old video. It shows a past argument where Nicole caught Chris drinking out in the garage. He completely lost his temper, but it forced him to admit he had an addiction. That's when he started going to AA meetings and met Rob, who actually helped him stay clean for a while. But losing his old partner Ray broke him all over again. Maddox plays another old clip showing Chris and Ray sitting in their cop car getting ready to bust a suspect. Right then, Nicole calls Chris on the phone, and Ray tells him to answer it while he walks up to the suspect alone. Out of nowhere, the suspect hits the gas and crushes Ray against the police cruiser. Chris drags a bleeding Ray into the car and swears he will get him to a doctor, but he also decides to chase the bad guy. Chris violently rams the suspect's car, flipping it over. Tragically, Ray ends up dying from his injuries. Chris keeps hunting the suspect down, corners him in the water, and arrests him. But later on, the court somehow finds the killer not guilty. Ever since that day, Chris has deeply regretted not pulling the trigger and shooting the guy when he had the chance. Maddox cuts him off, saying none of that backstory matters, and orders him to focus strictly on the day of his wife's murder. Chris explains his side of the story. When he got to the police station that morning, he realized his alcohol bottle was missing from his car. He knew right away Nicole had found it, so he sped back home and they got into a massive screaming match. Blinded by anger, he smashed her absolute favorite face. The flying glass actually cut her, which perfectly explains why a tiny bit of her blood was found on his clothes. But after that moment, his mind goes completely blank. For a terrifying second, Chris actually wonders if he might have blacked out and killed her. But Maddox coldly reminds him he only has 43 minutes left and gives him full access to Nicole's work files. Chris checks Nicole's contacts and calls Patrick, who is now sitting in a jail cell. He asks if Nicole was dealing with any other drama. Patrick reveals she was incredibly stressed out at her job because some expensive chemicals had gone missing, and her boss told her to secretly spy on her own coworkers. Chris instantly thinks a coworker did it. Maddox checks the system and notes that all of her coworkers were last seen hanging out at a neighborhood barbecue on Sunday, and none of them have been near Chris's house since. Chris sends Jack over to the Viking shipping depot where Nicole worked. While Jack drives, Chris watches the old barbecue video to put faces to her coworkers. Maddox scans them and confirms every single one has a bulletproof alibi for today. Chris then tries to hack into his own neighbor's security camera, but the system is down and the video is still stuck loading. Chris goes back to watching the barbecue guests driving up in their cars. He spots Rob's car pulling in, but it has 3 extra random people inside. Chris calls Rob and demands to know who they were. Rob easily gives him their names, swears none of them drove back home with him, and says they all clocked into work the next morning. Running dangerously low on time, Chris re-watches Britt's crying video from the night before and zooms in on the timestamp. He realizes her emotional rant was recorded while he was still physically at the police station, meaning he couldn't possibly be the one making Nicole cry at that exact moment. Since Britt might actually be a real witness now, Maddox finally allows Chris to call her again. Britt is a total wreck. She saw the viral video of Chris getting arrested and now knows he was secretly drinking again. She tells him people online are saying he's guilty and asks him point blank if it is true. Her grandpa tries to hang up again, but Maddox hacks the phone and blocks him because this call is official trial business. Chris desperately asks Britt what she heard that night. Britt says she heard Nicole sobbing and heard creepy, strange noises echoing in the house. On her social media video, you can see Britt walking around checking the rooms. Chris looks closely and spots that the basement door is wide open. They never leave that door open, and Britt promises she didn't go down there. Chris orders Maddox to enhance the video frame. When the blurry image clears, it shows a creepy hand resting right on the basement door handle. To figure out who the mystery man is, Chris hacks deep into Nicole's computer servers. Digging through her emails, he finds out someone is faking inventory records. They are hiding the fact that 300 kilos of chemicals went missing over the last 6 months. The stolen chemical is called urea granules, stuff used to make plant fertilizer, skin creams, and highly illegal street drugs sold in the red zones. Chris spots an email telling Nicole to meet up at the shipping docks. He pulls the security tape and sees Nicole having a screaming match with a guy named Holt. Holt begs her not to report the missing chemicals and asks for just a few more days. Nicole shoots him down because her own job is on the line. Holt gets furious and throws his stuff around. Chris hacks into Holt's personal emails and bank accounts. He discovers Holt is a massive gambling addict buried in debt. And surprisingly, Rob has been secretly giving him money to help him survive. Finding this out drops Chris's guilt score down to 94.7%. Chris immediately dials Rob's number, but Holt answers the phone instead. Holt just wishes Chris good luck and says he is busy looking for Rob. Maddox tries to ping Holt's GPS location during the exact time of Nicole's murder, but the system can't find him. Chris begs Maddox to check his neighbor's security camera one more time. They can clearly see the bushes moving, but the video file still hasn't finished downloading. Suddenly, Holt calls Chris back and says he still can't track Rob down anywhere. Chris snaps and accuses Holt of stealing the company chemicals. Holt finally breaks down and confesses the truth. Rob was the one stealing them all along. Because Holt owed Rob money, he tried to cover for him and get Nicole to back off. Now, Holt has no idea where Rob is, but another worker says they saw Rob driving off in a large truck. Maddox instantly starts tracking the missing truck, and Chris orders Jack to go follow it, warning her that Rob legally owns firearms. Right then, the neighbor's video file finally finishes loading. They watch the screen and see Rob crawling right out of the trunk of the neighbor's car. But to Chris's shock, this only drops his guilt score to 93.4%. Chris gets insanely frustrated and starts screaming at Maddox, which actually causes her robotic system to glitch out a few times. With only 19 minutes left to live, Chris calls his cop buddies and warns them about Rob's weapons. Jack and her tactical team surround Rob's house and kick the doors in. Chris looks at the camera feed and sees the truck isn't parked outside. Maddox scans the entire city grid for the truck but gets 0 hits because Rob unscrewed the license plates. Inside Rob's house, the SWAT team hit the jackpot. They find the stolen company chemicals and a pile of burned evidence. Looking at the setup, it is obvious Rob wasn't just selling the chemicals, he was cooking them into dangerous illegal drugs. They also find the truck's missing license plates and a scary textbook all about using chemicals to build massive bombs. Suddenly, traffic cameras catch the giant truck speeding straight through downtown Los Angeles. At that exact second, Maddox finishes restoring the torn childhood photo. It reveals the other boy in the picture is none other than David, the very first criminal Chris executed using the mercy system. David and Rob were actually biological brothers, but Rob got adopted by a different family and changed his last name. Chris puts the pieces together. Rob murdered Nicole to frame Chris, a sick payback for his brother's death. And worse, the bomb in the truck is driving straight toward the courthouse. A police drone zooms in on the truck's windshield and confirms Rob is behind the wheel. The camera shows him talking to someone sitting in the passenger seat, but the camera angle hides their face. Chris frantically calls his daughter Britt, but his father-in-law picks up and says she just went outside to get some fresh air. Chris hacks his own home security cameras and makes a horrifying discovery. Rob drove by and kidnapped Britt. At that very moment, the cops searching Rob's garage spot a digital bomb timer counting down. They sprint for their lives, and most of them barely make it out before the entire house explodes in a massive fireball. Chris screams into his radio trying to reach Jack, but he gets static. Maddox calculates the blast and realizes the garage bomb only used a tiny fraction of the stolen chemicals. That means the truck is loaded with the rest of it, enough explosive power to wipe out the entire city. Finally, Jack radios in to say she survived the blast and promises to hunt the truck down. Because of all this crazy new evidence, Chris's guilt probability officially drops to 0%. Maddox tries to end the trial and let him go, but Chris refuses to disconnect. He demands to stay plugged into the system so he can use the AI to stop Rob. Maddox flashes a warning that he only has 9 minutes left, and if the clock hits 0, the chair will automatically execute him anyway. Chris yells that he doesn't care. Saving his city and his little girl is the only thing that matters. Chris's raw emotional logic causes Maddox's code to glitch out again. Out on the highway, a massive fleet of police cars is hunting the truck. News helicopters broadcast the crazy chase live as Rob drives like a maniac, smashing into innocent civilian cars. One police cruiser gets hit so hard it crashes straight through a storefront window. As the truck speeds over a bridge, a SWAT helicopter hovers above and tries to drop an elite agent onto the roof. More cop cars swerve to block the bridge exit, but Rob just slams the gas and plows right through them, leaving the SWAT agent dangling with nowhere safe to land. Seeing no other option, Jock gets on the radio and orders her squad to use lethal force to stop Rob. Chris screams at her to stop because Britt is trapped inside, but even the AI Maddox agrees that blowing up the truck is the safest tactical choice. The cops deploy a tiny remote-controlled bomb car and drive it right under the truck's tires. But right before it explodes, the connection magically drops and it fails to detonate. Chris stares at the screen and wonders if Maddox secretly hacked the bomb to save Britt, but the AI stays completely silent. With only 4 tense minutes left on the clock, looking through Jack's camera, Chris looks Rob in the eyes, sees Britt crying for help in the passenger seat, and begs Rob to stop. A furious Rob screams that his brother David was completely innocent. Before Rob can explain what really happened, Jack pulls her weapon and shoots at the truck. The recoil makes Jack lose control of her flying bike and she violently crashes to the ground. Unstoppable, the massive truck slams right into the front lobby of the courthouse. Meanwhile, up in the courtroom, Chris's execution chair powers on. Down in the lobby, Rob jumps out of the truck, grabs Britt and uses her as a human shield while firing his gun at the security guards rushing him. Back in the chair, Chris only has 10 seconds left. She reboots online and she officially cancels the trial. Chris sprints to the elevator, rides down to the chaotic lobby, and rips a bulletproof vest off an unconscious security guard. He shouts at Maddox through his earpiece to dig up every single file she can find on David's old case. Chris steps out with his hands up and tries to talk Rob down, but Rob smiles and pulls out the bomb detonator. Before his thumb can hit the button, Maddox's face flashes onto a giant TV screen in the lobby. She tells Rob she will give him one final chance to prove his dead brother was innocent. Rob screams that he was literally talking to David on the phone at the exact time the murder happened, but Maddox instantly shuts him down, showing crime scene photos proving David didn't even have a phone on him when his body was found. While Rob is distracted yelling at the AI, Britt thinks fast and bites Rob's arm as hard as she can. He lets go and Chris completely tackles Rob to the floor. They wrestle violently for the detonator. Chris manages to rip the colorful wires right out of the detonator. Chris kicks the gun out of Rob's hand, snatches it up, and points it right at Rob's head. Filled with rage over Nicole's death, Chris wants to pull the trigger, but Britt drops to her knees, crying and begging her dad not to become a killer. Suddenly, Jack runs into the lobby and fires her gun at Rob. Chris has to jump in front and physically stop his own partner from shooting Rob dead. Rob yells that he spoke to a female cop at the precinct and she swore she would pull David's phone records. This massive clue means whoever arrested David absolutely knew he was innocent. Maddox quickly hacks into the precinct's secret server logs and finds out that someone did look at Rob's phone records to hide the call. Chris looks at his partner in horror and realizes it was Jack who arrested David. Chris demands to know what she did. At first, Jack denies everything, but Maddox easily hacks into Jack's personal files. The missing cell phone had been safely locked inside the police evidence room, but Jack secretly stole it and tossed it into the city river. Backed into a corner, Jack finally confesses. She admits she framed David and threw away the evidence just to prove to the public that the new Mercy AI system worked perfectly and kept the streets safe. Chris looks at her in disgust, tells her the city needs real justice, not fake executions, and orders the other cops to lock her up. With the nightmare finally over, Chris runs over and wraps Britt in a massive hug. Up on the screen, Maddox is quietly processing the fact that she actually executed an innocent man, questioning her own programming. Chris looks up at the camera and tells the AI that just like humans, machines can make terrible mistakes, and the only way forward is to learn from them. And that is exactly where the movie ends. If you enjoyed this wild recap, please feel free to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.